Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this session. We are truly delighted to have you, and we hope that you're going to have an inspiring session with us. With us today as guest speaker, we have Dr. Olutoyin Oyelade. She's Canada-based, the president of Casa Foundation, and the co-founder of InVCAP, an investment-focused firm based in Canada that also has operations in Africa. She organizes impactful events that target women and entrepreneurs on the African continent, and she's equally a keynote speaker and has spoken on major platforms around the world, giving impactful talks on the development of the world at large. We are truly delighted to have you, Doctor, and we welcome you once again to the session. We would equally like to introduce to you Viola A. I hope I did pronounce it well. She is co-founder and president of Ovamba Solutions, a trade tech company focused on providing solutions to banks that intend to provide the solutions to SMEs on the African continent. She is a renowned keynote speaker, and she has spoken on very renowned platforms around the world, and it is truly a pleasure to have her with us today. You're welcome, Viola, and we look forward to an amazing exchange with you. That said, I would like to begin with you, Viola, to find out what business has been like for you since the outbreak of the pandemic.
Thank you so much. So as I was saying, we have always been in the market in Cameroon, Ivory Coast, as a solution for small and medium enterprises, especially those that in the informal sector, to gain access to finance and to get financial inclusion. Before COVID-19, we were quite happily doing this work and had started to license our technology to banks. It's almost as if it was prescient, so to speak. Now that we have the COVID-19 situation, it has revealed some great opportunities and some very disturbing patterns. Because we are creating solutions for banks to do a better job of extending financial inclusion to small and medium enterprises, the first thing that we noticed was that the banks are not actually able to absorb or to transition to a digital platform for reasons that are both internal to the way banks are built and to the policy and regulatory environment that they exist in. That's the first part. COVID also revealed to us that many of the informal sector and even those businesses that are formally set up don't always have the right tools to allow them to cross the digital divide in a way that helps with business continuity. But across the globe, and as well as in Africa, what we also discovered is that disaster recovery planning was not as strong as it ought to be. And when you engage in these conversations with leadership, the fear that their weaknesses will be exposed and exploited prevents them from even having a conversation about the weaknesses that might be inherent in their enterprises. We as a company have responded to this by creating performance improvement and performance management tools that are handheld so that there is a sense of understanding what to do next. Decision making is a weakness along with the skills gap in our continent. And so COVID-19 has pushed an acceleration to embrace a digital reality, but it's also revealed the weaknesses, which always represents an opportunity. Now, besides all of that, because of our role in understanding how the digital impacts the humanity in a cultural sense as well, COVID-19 has caused me personally to understand when we are creating these technologies and innovating for the human beings. After COVID-19 stops being such a hot topic, what will those human beings be like, and what will their response to technology be? How will we help people to integrate themselves in a new way so that they can take advantage of the direction that the world is going and do not fall on the wrong side of what will definitely be a digital divide, which is equal to a new form of poverty? So those are the things that we've seen COVID-19 do and how we are responding.
Okay, thank you very much. It's really insightful, and I'm happy to have you share this. Dr. Olu, would you mind telling us what COVID-19 has been for you in terms of business?
Obviously, the expectation was that across our continent, for instance, decisive action will be taken, by from government side and from the public sector side, the private sector, and so on. But what I found is that as was done in the West, because as you mentioned, I speak from Canada. Um, the response was actually very swift and rapid. And so for business, for the federal government, there were a lot of packages, stimulus package, a lot of emergency benefits rolled out. And so I would say to that extent that a lot of businesses appear to have coped, at least speaking from from the Canadian perspective. Small businesses with a lot of options as of last week, for instance, almost 1 million businesses had actually applied for the various packages, the various relief and palliative packages rolled out by the federal government, or using accessing the various windows of opportunity. For some, pay their rents, for some to, just to ensure that utilities, obligations to the government, and also private sector, the logistic providers are met by drawing various facilities, by drawing various grants, from all of these packages and so on. And so speaking from that Canadian end, I would say this is what has sustained a lot of businesses over time. I mean, if you have almost 1 million firms and businesses applying for such. On the individual side, from the statistics that it shows actually that over 18 million individuals are also benefiting from various packages, stimulus packages, benefits, palliatives that have actually been rolled out. And so you find a lot of people able to survive in these times because of that which has been rolled out. Now, coming back to Africa, because as you also know, we do a lot of business in Africa and we have a lot of outposts, in West Africa. And so what we found is that because of a lack or because of a huge gap in palliative measures, we haven't really seen a lot, some effectiveness in that regard. Stimulus packages and a lot of benefits and relief measures are not readily accessible. And because of this, what we found is that a lot of businesses are possibly struggling right now, definitely struggling, and that's just the truth. One, because they're not able to draw from this. Two, because in some rare cases where a few packages have been rolled out, the stimulus benefits, we perhaps would need maybe not necessarily an arm and a leg, but at least a leg to actually access some of these packages, and I mean, when I say that, I just mean that some of the requirements. So if you're an SME, for instance, looking to draw some facility from the discount window of some of the banks, you would need to have an asset, like a vehicle. You would need to have maybe like a title document or something to show that you have. This is not necessarily the case out in the West. You just need to be registered as a business. And once the documentation can be referenced, then you can actually have access. You have a ready bank account that has been operated before March 1st. And so these are just the main conditions. However, there are a few other things being looked at in the rare cases where stimulus packages have been rolled out in Africa. This actually is not really helping the sustainability, the long-term sustainability of a lot of businesses, because ultimately you find a situation where not only are the businesses suffering or struggling, the fact is the supply chain becomes heavily impacted by these issues, because if you can't pay your bills, for instance, it starts with not paying your utility bills, it starts with not meeting your obligations to your logistic providers, your suppliers, and so on. So within that supply chain, you find a huge gap. And once that gap is there, once it affects the first level, it affects the next level, and so on, it becomes a ripple effect right across the entire chain of supply. So these are major issues that need to be dealt with when you look at that. Of course, globally, however, more needful, this is needed more.
Nelson, please mute your phone.
Yeah, so this is needed.
Please carry on.
That's all right. This is needed more in Africa than in the West. Of course, globally, we understand that there are huge challenges, there are huge gaps and all of that. But, the impact is, more reflected in various parts than the other. So this would just be by way of my opening.
Okay, thank you very much, Doctor. I think my first question would go to Viola, because you mentioned something very interesting. And I would like her to elaborate a little bit on what she thinks could be the way forward for SMEs on the continent who don't have a collateral. I think her solutions are geared towards facilitating that. Viola, please could you enlighten us a little bit on what you propose as a way forward?
Olu was talking about, especially as it relates to the supply chains. We've always operated from a very different position as it relates to funding and financing businesses. And she's quite right. What you're seeing, the ripple impact of those that can no longer access capital to fund basic operations, so therefore they cannot pay for their inventory. They can't sell inventory because they can't get their hands on inventory. And so you have this mass adoption, fall down within the system. Ovamba has always operated on measuring risk versus credit and helping customers to buy the goods that they need by raising capital from institutional investors, buying those goods, customs clearing them, importing them, all of the logistics and the Airbnb style of warehouse on demand. So what we've been doing is pushing that model with the banks to help their customers to at least sustain where they are and protect the little that they do have left. Working to curate the business ecosystem to allow domestic trade to be funneled. And this is where COVID-19 actually is an opportunity for Africa on a general standpoint. We've relied very much on the West and on China, India, Turkey, and all those other places to sell us these goods that come from the raw materials that are underneath our own very feet. Perhaps now leadership will take a look at how do we create a velocity of capital within the systems by funding and pushing manufacturing on the continent versus waiting for finished goods to be sold to us. If we do that, then we have got an entire new industry of manufacturing, design, and secondary markets that will make us very self-sustaining. And we have the human capital to be able to do that. Now, with that in mind, as a goal that we'd all like to go towards, what we've been doing to help our customers to grow is to point them in the direction of where they can source goods locally. We've been working with customers who may have a hard time with finding markets because we have this AI-driven dashboard of understanding where goods sit within the supply chain and physically in the geography, helping them to liquidate their goods so that they can have the capital to satisfy some of their business operations. But more than anything, trying to go to the source of our businesses, which is the banks. Sit down, explain to the banks that being able to offer a non-interest bearing product that is an alternative trade finance gives them the ability to continue to move capital to businesses that need it in such a way that being creditworthy is no longer the point. Not everybody within Africa is creditworthy to the level of the banks. After all, we know that banks are often involved in the collateralization and the securitization of houses and land in order to mortgage them and provide a loan that is not properly collateralized against the debt to income ratios of the businesses that they deal with. So the smaller businesses get left out of this. They need a different tool. And those very same smaller businesses are the ones that are driving GDP through their activities within trade. So if we protect the base, bearing in mind that this is not the last time we're going to see one of these interruptions to our trade and to our business economies, if we shore them up and teach them how to impact resistance, then the next time that this happens, because we've had HIV, we've had Ebola, we're going to see more spikes, we will have a business economy that can actually weather the storm and be the beacon necessary to figure out when we're going to come to the end of this tunnel. So for us, it really is a case of continue to source institutional investment from those that still understand that Africa is one of the greatest destinations for investment of this nature. help the businesses that currently exist, and to continue to innovate digital solutions for things like delivery, warehousing, logistics, everything that will protect the ecosystem and keep it strong and healthy.
Oh, thank you very much for the contribution. Dr. Olu, and you work a lot with the government, especially in Nigeria. And I wanted to find out, what do you think the government could do in countries in Africa, especially, to be able to help support startups to pull through this pandemic?
I do know that a lot of measures have been put in place. So maybe we should start from what is in place right now. Citing the example of perhaps the Nigerian government. Perhaps that might be reflective of a few other countries in the West African part of the continent. For small businesses, I do know that they have access to loans, soft loans, where they can actually make some application to, citing the example of Nigeria, for instance, the Central Bank of Nigeria, where you have the SME, the loans to SME, small and medium enterprises, and some of these loans are, they span a total of about 2 to 3 to 5 years, short to medium term loans. And what usually happens then is these applications they have to go either directly to the window or through the office in charge at the state government level, what you call the provincial government, what you call the regional government. And so your business is expected to be registered fully for you to access these loans. There are some protocols to follow, registration with the commission that is in charge of that, so that at least you can be verified as a business that has been in existence before the COVID and so on. And so once you access these loans, some at zero rate, some at a very low single-digit rate, which actually is totally different from what you currently have, where you have dual digit, you have double-digit rates across most African countries. So when you offer the loan at single-digit, for sure there's help on the way, because they are not readily accessible from the commercial banks. And so these loans are accessible. And usually, what do people really need right now? Who has the cash? Whoever has the cash is king, as we know, generally taught. And so what the government is actually doing is to make sure that they push out as much of this as possible. One, to sustain business. Two, to address the issues of food shortages and so on, commodities and so on. And so once this is in place, then you continue to oil the engine of the economy by continuing with trade and so on. And so what the issue though is that how many people, I don't have the statistics readily available, but the issue is a lot of the small businesses that we deal with are yet to access these loans. One, perhaps because of the processing time. Two, because of the procedures and the protocols to follow. And three, because of the regulatory framework. Because no matter how much you roll out the loans, there's still a few other things that, for reporting purposes, for statistics, how many companies have applied from this state, from this province, from this region, depending on the governmental structure that is existent in most of these countries. When drawing an analogy between what happens in my current place of residence right now, you recall that I just gave you the statistics readily. 1 million companies have applied for government reliefs and emergency benefits and so on, and it's a total of 54 billion has been accessed as we speak to date. And then when you talk about the small business, the individuals, because there's a $2,000 check paid to every individual that is out of work right now. So it's a $2,000 check paid to those ones every month. So they access that, but they give them the report on a daily basis that 18.3 million people, which is half of the population of Canada, of a total of 36. So 18.35 million have already accessed that loan. Not only have they accessed the loan, they have continued to access the loan in the last 3 months. I mean, it's not a loan, sorry, it's a benefit. So it's not repayable. Okay. And then you have the 40,000 loans, which businesses registered before March 1st have access to. and 10,000, 25%, 10,000 out of the 40 is forgivable. So ultimately you borrowed 30,000 and at 0%. And so when you have that, because it's the statistics and the figure is there as to how many companies have accessed that today. Now comparing that, I tried to get a few figures together, and I do have a few slides that I would show, but I really wasn't able to put together or pull out the figure as to how many businesses have been impacted by that window of opportunity that I mentioned before, the small business loans. How many of them have accessed it across the country? We know of some states, but when you pull everything together, are people readily able to access this? And how many have accessed it if it is so? And so I think these are the gaps, because the way you know that this is being impactful, or that the government is being impactful on the lives of the businesses or in the affairs of the businesses. And then the way that you can really tell is when you actually look at the statistics and you can say, of this number of businesses duly registered as of so date, these are the many that have actually accessed a loan like this. I think so that statistics is, there's a gap in that, and that needs to be put in place. So yes, it's been rolled out, but we need to be able to quantify it so that we understand the benefits. Second of all, in terms of health and safety standards, there are protocols. This is being read. We hear of this. It's been rolled out on a daily basis. It's been reiterated. But the issue is the monitoring officers, the regulatory authorities that are in charge of monitoring, measuring compliance, and so on. They're doing a fantastic job so far, given that this is Africa, and I'm sure you know what I mean, because we're all Africans on the call today. So it's been fantastic so far. However, the spread of COVID-19 is still on, as we can see from the numbers. It's still growing. And so that indicates that there is a gap in compliance on one side, monitoring on the other side, meaning that whilst monitoring is perhaps very effective in the large major cities, perhaps some of the remote areas or the densely populated areas and parts and cities of Africa, there needs to be more attention paid. Before now, a McKinsey report had actually mentioned March 31st, 2020 had mentioned that social distancing will be very difficult to observe in major cities and large cities of Africa for obvious reasons. You have cities where more than 10, 15 people actually share a room or two-room apartment. And so what type of social distancing are we really talking about in scenarios like that? Unlike the West that actually preached the social distancing scenario, because that's actually what is acceptable. But remember that we're talking about groups of average homes where you have 2 people, 3 people, families of 4, or the 2,000 square foot land or apartment or home. This is not the case in Africa. Most of the cities are so densely populated. Most of the places are so overcrowded. And so how do you practice distancing? And a lot of people come back and tell you that what's the point in distancing yourself when you haven't even fed yourself? So they need to be on the streets actually looking for food to eat, particularly when the businesses are not open, instead of staying cooped up in the house, trying to observe some of these health and safety standards. So then, the moral of that point is that perhaps a need to tinker a little with the strategies to implement the issue of curtailing the spread of COVID-19 arises because the scenario for some of the countries out here on this part of the divide will be different from the execution back in Africa. There is the point that the spread, which you will see from my slides, is not being, yes, it's been spreading, but not at the, not at such an alarming rate. When you compare the notes with the United States, where you have over 2 million cases, of which you've had almost 125,000 deaths, So when you compare that, and that's just one country, when you compare that to the whole continent, of course, we're doing well in Africa, but there's a need for the necessary precautionary measures to be taken to rethink the distancing part of the argument, and then to put necessary measures in place to curtail the spread as we speak. Thank you.
You're indeed right, Doctor. In many parts of Africa, people say they can't stay hungry and maintain and respect the regulations put in place to curb the virus. So you're really right. And I would like us to talk about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and I think this would be excellent for Viola. I would like to know, what's your take? What do you think the governments of these countries that form the African Continental Free Trade Area, the 54 countries that are signed, what do you think they can do to enable SMEs to meet up with challenges after post-COVID-19?
Well, the first thing that I would do is put a succession plan in place to remove all of the very elderly who are in charge of the Africa Free Trade Agreement and put people in who are much younger and have a digital respect for how the world is going to be and the role that Africa will play in that. We are likely to fall prey to ancient thinking of the diaper-wearing leadership who really do not understand the needs of the population of individuals who are less than half their age. We're about to have a bulge bracket of the greatest 14 to 45-year-old group of human beings the world has ever seen. And we cannot continue to have them led by individuals that actually don't even know how to switch on their own cell phones. That's the first thing that I would recommend in all absolute honesty. Because at the end of the day, it does come down to leadership. That's number one. Number two, we need to take a very hard look at how we harmonize the business contracts, legal contracts, framework, policy, capital, foreign exchange, and the rules by which goods and services move around when you can't even get individuals to board a plane that goes directly to the country of choice without them either having to leave the continent or fly over another one just so that you can come backwards. We've got simple issues such as, will courts allow a PDF document and an electronic signature? Most likely not. That's because as long as the individuals that are in charge continue to enjoy the confusion of paper, it will be very difficult to have transparency, which is a prime directive for something like the African Free Trade Agreement. We will also need to have hubs and incubators for the products and services that are geared specifically to the goals of the African Free Trade Agreement, and they need to plan 50 to 100 years out versus just now. This is going to be very important. We need cold storage, transportation, we need trains, we need infrastructure, and we need one of the most basic things of all, electricity to run the entire thing. If we do not have a leadership that understands that this will be the greatest opportunity Africa ever had to elevate all human beings on the continent so that they've got the democracy of access to opportunity, then we're just going to end up with another layer of post. I need you to use your phone, please.
I don't know. Someone has to mute.
Annie, please mute your phone.
Okay, mute. Okay, I got her. Sorry.
We cannot afford to miss this opportunity. We cannot afford to have another situation where we've got people waiting on supposedly well-intentioned NGOs coming to save us when our own diaspora are available to be tapped for the ideas, solutions, and innovations necessary. If a country needs roads built and they're able to call the Chinese for it, they can easily call a Nigerian, a Ghanaian, and a Kenyan to form a consortium together to do the exact same job. This has got to change. Otherwise, the African Free Trade Agreement is going to just be another layer of lost opportunity with no trickle-down economics, even though the digital elements are there to make all of this work quite well.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, this is really insightful. I've been looking at this African Continental Free Trade Area, and I didn't have a clue I mean, this is a whole new perspective you've opened up in my mind. Thank you very much. Dr. Olu, I would like us to look at something related to...
Natalie, I'm very eager to hear what you mean. You said it's opened up a brand new perspective on your mind. I'm sure people would like to know what you mean by that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. I'm actually carrying out research on the African Continental Free Trade Area and trying to see why it has delayed, because this is a project that didn't come up today. It is a project that the OAU had in mind and later transferred to the AU when it moved on to the AU, and it has been lingering for a very long time. And today we are talking about the African Continental Free Trade Area. Many people think it just came up now, but this is something that has been in the pipeline. So what delayed the implementation of this project? Okay, today the Secretary General actually said this week that they were going to move forward with the implementation plan, notwithstanding the pandemic. Okay, but this shouldn't come like a surprise. This is something that has been lingering for long. So in my mind, I keep asking the question, why this long?
Just to wrap up, basically, that the message is clear from governments to the private sector and developmental institutions. They just need to double down on their already proven resolve to significantly expand existing efforts to safeguard our economies in Africa and economies generally across the globe. In many countries, there is an opportunity to take bolder and more creative steps to secure supply chains of essential products, to contain the health crisis and maintain, the stability of our financial systems, to maintain the sustainability of businesses. As we all know, the small businesses run the engine of all the nations. And so more efforts, more targeted efforts towards helping small businesses survive, including the ones that are not even struggling right now in the long near term. Helping businesses survive this crisis, supporting households in their economic, economically, that also becomes very imperative for the governments to do. On the part of government, also the private sector and all its agencies, we are looking at situations where they are considering an extensive stimulus package, like I alluded to earlier on. In most parts of Africa, the stimulus packages are not really well known. And in the cases where they're well known, I'm not sure they're as readily accessible as what we have in some of the countries represented on the other side of the divide. So this becomes a major opportunity in these times, the few weeks left that we're hoping and praying. It becomes an opportunity to consider an extensive stimulus package to reverse the economic damage that we have seen so far, caused by the challenges of this pandemic. I think with all of that said, I would conclude by saying that agile organizations, this actually talks, now this pandemic has shown the imperativeness of the agility of organizations. The fact that organizations need to be very agile in these times, they need to be. The ones that have embraced the tenets of agility even before the pandemic, you will see the results even now, because they've been able to actually address, they've quickly adapted, they knew exactly what to do, and they've been able to actually adapt quickly to the changing business priorities and the scenarios that we've seen. But now agility becomes really, really critical for the success of business and for the sustainability of both governments and businesses, even post-pandemic. These are my comments, and these are my closing comments that I would like to provide at this time. I would also say that I don't know, Natalie is back. I don't know if she has any more questions, but what I would say is that with all of the comments that we've made so far, I would ask, I can still take maybe one more question if there is. Otherwise, in view of the timelines, one would just possibly want to wrap it up now.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Olu. I'm so sorry. I don't know my internet connection right now.
That's fine.
Yeah, I got lost on what was shared, so I think we'll just wrap up because I might ask the question that you answered.
All right. Yeah.
I think Viola too has left.
She headed to another meeting. I think she had a spill, but that's fine. So can we wrap up now? So we can.
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you everyone who took time to participate. We'll be sharing the video to everyone inbox so you can go through and also edit it and send it to you in a more formal way so you can share it to your network. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Olu. And I look forward to having you again in the future.
Absolutely.
When the internet connections are better.
Yeah, that's fine. That's all right. I would actually like to express also our appreciation as a group and as a company to all of the organizers of this. There's no time better than this to have a meeting like this, a conference like this. And I thank you for inviting me to be your guest speaker today. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it from Alexia to Natalie and the entire team of the Evolve magazine. I really thank you. I was just saying that I'm not sure if you're in France right now or if you're in Cameroon, but I would just like to say from Evolve France to Evolve Cameroon and to the entire team of your groups listening in from Africa, I would say thank you so much for having me on the webinar today. I really appreciate it and I look forward to doing more of this. Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Very much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.